Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Well, in today's episode, we're going to talk about a range of subjects, and this is going to be, for better or worse, essentially a free-for-all. Very rarely do I ever make any sorts of edits in the content that I produce. And today is going to be really no different, and maybe in some respects even a little bit worse through lack of editing. We're just going to kind of let things go. So obviously no AI, no artificial intelligence, no editor in the background making things look and sound better. This is just me talking to you, and you, in all probability, being the most smartest, most knowledgeable listeners on YouTube today. And I'm very happy to say that in all probability, the vast majority of the listeners to this program are not made up of the uninformed urbanite, right? Not made up of those that are completely preyed upon by popular culture here in the un-United States of America and other nation states as well. So, first topic today that I want to delve into is not going to be the ongoing war between the Russian Federation, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and its Ukrainian proxy forces. What I want to jump on today is first Greenland. And is what the President of the United States, Donald Trump, is doing in terms of messaging a desire to take control of Greenland, is that helping him? Is that helping J.D. Vance get elected in a few more years? Well, we don't know. We don't know. I would say, based on how the mainstream media is projecting upon the uninformed urbanites around the United States, probably not. Probably not. You would think that this is 1939 and German forces are about ready to enter Poland, from the way the mainstream media talks about Greenland. So let's have a quick look at Greenland. Very, very large island. I mean, some would call it possibly a continent. It's not a continent, it's part of North America. Just under 1 million square miles. A vast, vast territory, largely covered by ice. Lots of natural resources, lots of undiscovered natural resources, and lots of fresh water. Population, about 50,000. Now, it's often associated with Denmark. However, the vast majority of the population are indigenous Inuits. Kind of like Eskimos. Yeah. Now, if the United States were to take control of Greenland, there's a couple of challenges. Like, what would it look like in terms of being part of the United States? Would it become a state? Would it become a territory like Puerto Rico? Probably a territory. You would have to believe that the indigenous population and those that exist on the island, in all probability, are going to vote for the socialist form of government, the Democrats. So I'm going to read something to you here. This was obviously generated by an AI overview about the cost that Denmark endures by controlling Greenland. Greenland's welfare system, providing universal health care, education, and social security, is heavily funded by significant annual subsidies from Denmark. Covering a large chunk of its budget and essential public services with challenges including high costs of living, economic reliance on fish, and workforce shortages in welfare sectors like healthcare. The welfare system aims for Nordic-style benefits, but relies on Danish aid for stability facing future budgetary pressures from demographic shifts. Now remember, the Inuit, the indigenous population of Greenland, which makes up the majority of the population, about 80%, if not more, maybe 90%, is a pre-wheel civilization. Prior to contact by Danish explorers, the Inuit were a pre-wheel civilization. There were no two-story structures. They were essentially living in huts made of whalebone and other biological matter. There's not really any desire to innovate. So if you think of Iceland, okay, and then you look at Greenland, you got to really separate the two. That is not what you are getting with Greenland. You are not getting Iceland with Greenland. You are not getting the same sort of innovation and the desire to succeed and advance as you get in Iceland in terms of what you would get in Greenland. You are largely getting a social welfare reliant people on Greenland. And yes, the United States would have to ultimately do one of two things. Cut the social safety net, and that would cause incredible problems in terms of strife on the island, in terms of possible rebellion and what have you, or pay out large sums of money. Now, at the same time, in all probability, the benefit, if we look at the cost versus benefit, if the United States were to exploit the resources of Greenland, then yes, it would be worth the cost. It would be worth the cost of taking care of a few thousand Inuits, providing them with a social safety net, some spending money and housing. In terms of the benefit we, the United States, would receive in terms of controlling those natural resources in and around Greenland. Now look, make no mistake. The United States militarily controls Greenland. We'll go up here to the northwest quadrant of Greenland, and I think here it is, yeah. So this is the primary U.S. military base on the island. It's a Space Force facility, very large, expansive facility with a significant U.S. presence on the island. This base is totally made up of U.S. personnel, with a few Danish personnel and other NATO nation states providing some personnel to this base. But by and large, it is a United States base. Now, you often hear the president talk about, China and the Russian Federation are operating close and around Greenland. Maybe, but if there were to be a major conflict, the United States is much better positioned to completely seal off and take control of Greenland than the Russian Federation or China. The United States would be able to do this very quickly. The United States has contingency plans for this very scenario. So is it of strategic importance for the United States to take control of Greenland, to occupy Greenland, to have the ability to do whatever it wants with Greenland? Not so much from a military standpoint. The United States already does that. That capability is already there. Now, because of the way this is being now messaged, in terms of this very robust rhetoric about taking control of Greenland, it's creating a perception that the United States already does not control Greenland, which it does. So again, if there was going to be a conflict, if something was going to happen, if a third world war was going to break out, and God forbid, outside the use of nuclear weapons, the United States would and has the ability to rapidly take control. It has a massive footprint already on Greenland. It has a larger footprint, a larger military footprint than what currently exists from the Danish government, Denmark. There are more U.S. military personnel on Greenland right now than there are Danish troops or EU troops or NATO forces. So that's really a moot point if you look at it that way. The United States militarily already controls Greenland. Now, the United States does not control in terms of having the ability to exploit and take advantage of the great many resources on Greenland. We're not really doing that yet. And I think that is the most important factor in terms of the benefit versus the cost of taking control of Greenland. Again, if the United States is going to take ownership of this pre-will civilization and provide them housing and health care and rudimentary living expenses, then yes, the United States would need to take control of those resources as well. Again, cost versus benefit. The cost of the Inuits and some of the old retired Danish folks that live there versus the benefit of taking control of those resources. But again, is this helping the Trump administration win future elections? Or is it causing an unnecessary disturbance? I would say that the United States could take control of Greenland in a different manner. You don't have to utilize this sort of rhetoric to achieve your in-game goals. You can do this, you can control Greenland without having to verbally say you want to control Greenland. Again, from a military aspect, the United States already controls Greenland. Very much so. So the idea that we have to annex Greenland, the United States needs to annex Greenland to militarily control Greenland, is something the United States does not need to do. Now, in terms of resources, that would require a bit more of creative positioning in order to exploit those resources. But it is not outside the realm of possibility that the United States could do that without having to annex Greenland and take on both the political burden of these people who live on this island, and then at the same time support them. There's ways to do this without having to go the route that the administration is on, the course that the current administration is on. I just do not believe it is going to help the administration win future-facing elections with the course of messaging that's happening right now, especially with the mainstream media, the way it operates. Now, if the mainstream media did not exist in the manner that it existed today, then yes, absolutely, the United States could take control of Greenland with very little problem. And if the mainstream media in the United States were to position that achievement in a positive light, then it would be something that would be doable. But unfortunately, here in the United States of America, we have this very harsh left-wing media that if President Trump were to facilitate the curing of cancer, in all probability, the left-leaning media here in the United States would probably find a way to articulate how cancer is actually beneficial to the citizens of the United States. And what President Trump did was wrong by facilitating the curing of cancer. That's just a fact. That is the absolute fact. Well, I hope that gives you somewhat of an idea on the voice of reason's position on Greenland. I'm not saying the United States should not take control of Greenland. I'm saying the United States should message it differently and maybe go about it a different way. Go about it a different way. You can control Greenland without having to message it the way it's being currently messaged. You can do that. And yes, by all means, if the United States feels that it must control Greenland, and again, if we take a look at history, if you are a nation state and you are not expanding and you are not growing through territorial acquisition, through the increase in population of your baseline citizenry, if you are not expanding economically, then you are stagnating. And then if you are not stagnating, you are then contracting. And we all know how that eventually ends. And this is just not for the United States. This is for all nation states. Most successful nation states were the byproduct of colonialism and or the benefit of some form of imperialism. Again, might makes right. It's just the way it is. I get that it doesn't sound good and it doesn't feel good for some folks, but at the end of the day, if you're not expanding, then you are going to be contracting. And you are eventually going to fail as a nation state. It's just going to happen. It's the way it is. What else is going on? Let's go down to the lower 50. Let's cruise down to Minnesota. Good old New Somaliland. Are they going to change it? Are they going to change the name from Minnesota to New Somaliland? Do you think that's going to happen? Look, this is very, very simple in terms of what is happening in Minnesota. You see, they changed the flag not too long ago. Was it a couple of years back, more or less? Have you seen the new flag of Minnesota? You know, look at the flag, look at that, and then look at the flag of Somalia. Somalia. Yeah, Somalia. What would happen? What would happen, just hypothetically, right? Like, Somalia is a pretty rough place. I mean, do we all agree that Somalia is probably not the greatest place maybe to go get, like, if you're going to have cataract surgery, you're going to have some cataracts removed from your eyes. Would you go to Mogadishu? Would you go to the Moog to get some cataract surgery done? No, probably would. Where would you go? Would you rather go to Mogadishu? Or would you rather go to, like, let's just throw a dart in Western Europe and let it land somewhere? Would you go there? Or would you go to Mogadishu to get eye surgery? Why not? Why wouldn't you go get, why would you not go get eye surgery in Mogadishu? Now let's make this even a little more interesting. Let's hypothetically say that we were to transplant the entire population of Somaliland, right? We're going to take all the Somalis and we're going to put them on a boat, and then that boat's going to sail all the way around to Iceland. And then we take all the Icelandic people and we put them on a boat and we sail them all the way around to Somalia. What do you think? What do you believe, in your opinion, what would Iceland then look like after being populated by Somalis? I'm just asking a question. Don't take it the wrong way. I'm just asking, what would happen if Iceland was entirely populated by Somali? And Somaliland was entirely populated by the people of Iceland. What would happen? Do you think there would be eventually a net immigration from Iceland or towards Iceland? And do you think with the Icelandic people, let's say, controlling Somaliland for a period of, let's say, 50 years, what would it look like? Would it look different? Or would it look the same? Look, I'm just asking questions. That's all. And as you, the viewer, being the highly intelligent viewership that you are, please comment in the comment section. What do you think? What do you think it would look like? Now we go back over to Minnesota, and we kind of have a textbook example of what happens when you bring in the Somali. I think it's 70% of all Somali immigrants. Is that what we're going to call them? We're going to call them immigrants? What do you think they're called? What would you rather call them? Immigrants? Not immigrants? I don't know. Somalis living in Minnesota, they're most of them are on welfare. Most of them are on welfare. Kind of like the Inuits up in Greenland, right? kind of like the Inuits. Most of them are on welfare and beyond welfare, in some cases. In some cases, they're on welfare, and then some of them have managed to prosper and become very affluent. They have become very wealthy, and not always has this been done by quote unquote legal means, right? We're seeing this happen right now in Minnesota, where a great number of Somalis are exploiting the Minnesota state government, are plundering the Minnesota state government in terms of utilizing fraudulent based tactics to enrich themselves, and then give kickbacks to the very government that is allowing this to happen. Yeah. If you let them in, if you build it, they will come. And then what happens? Well, it's happening. It's happening. Is it really the issue that Somalia is really that bad of a place? Is it really the land? The land is harsh, right? Make no mistake that the land inside Somaliland is harsh. Very harsh. I would think that if Ethiopia were to desire that land, they could probably take it, right? But for whatever reason, they've decided not to take that land. They could, but they just most likely don't want it. Now, at the same time, you would have to argue that Iceland, in all probability, in some ways, is just as harsh. It's just on the opposite side of the spectrum in terms of one is very hot, one is very cold. But the big but, right, is the people in Iceland are prospering. They're prospering. The people that exist right now in Iceland, mostly Northern Europeans that got on a boat and decided to settle there, have made it very prosperous. Now again, I'm just asking this question. If these same people would have ended up, the same Northern Europeans would have ended up in Somaliland, what would it look like? What would it look like? Well, I think we have an example of maybe sort of what it could look like. There are areas in South Africa that are absolutely beautiful, that Dutch explorers settled a very sparse and essentially what at the time was a very uninhabited area of the planet. There's this false narrative that when the European explorers arrived in what is South Africa, that there was already people here. There were very, very few actual people living in this area. But, we look at this, right? And these are beautiful homes, relatively nice infrastructure. Big, massive, beautiful homes. on a golf course with pools, irrigation, prosperity. Now let's go over to Somaliland. Traveling up, not Madagascar. We could go to Madagascar and we could talk about Madagascar, but I think I've picked on Madagascar quite a bit in recent months. So we're going to not pick on Madagascar right now. But we're going to go up and today we're going to pick on Somaliland. And yeah, again, it's a rough area. It's hot, it's sparse, and it definitely does not look like the garden route in South Africa. It just doesn't. Yeah, that's tough. You know what really gets me is I find it interesting is if you go and you look at, if you're on Google Earth and you go to certain large cities in some cases South America, but most cases it's going to be Sub-Saharan Africa. There's the walls that go around the homes, and on the top of the walls they break up glass, and then they affix the broken glass to the top of the wall. Have you guys seen that? If you get a chance, go check that out. That's really. I'm waiting for that to happen here in the United States, to go into a city near me and to finally see that actually happen here. It may have already happened. It may have happened in Minnesota. Maybe not. I don't know. But again, is there anywhere in Somalia that looks like the garden route in southern South Africa? Is there anywhere? I mean, we could even compare and contrast areas of South Africa that may not be or may be similarly unhospitable, right? But I mean, it's still even here very inhospitable. But again, still a very high standard of living, and having the ability to go into these areas. I would argue that northwestern South Africa, areas such as Namibia, Botswana, probably as hostile as Somalia. But again, higher standard of living, definitely. I mean, it's definitely there. Oriana, the town in I believe it's the Orange Free State. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But again, definitely case example of a small group of people going into a very inhospitable place and making it, in some cases, a paradise, a gem surrounded by a sea of very hostile lands. But they were able to do it. I'll have to eventually find Oriana on here and have a look at that as well. Very small town in South Africa that is actually prospering, and it is rapidly growing. Now the question is why is that happening in Oriana? Why is that happening? Look, I'm just asking questions. Right? Why in Iceland do you have low rates of corruption, essentially zero crime, very nice towns and cities, everything works, public services work, people are happy, people are not trying to leave. But in Somalia, they leave. They go. They leave. And, in some cases, like the attempted annexation of Minnesota by the Somali, is creating an environment in terms of corruption and chaos that looks very much like what you would see in, you named it, you guessed it, Somaliland. Yep. So over the last 4 years, the United States has made a monumental error, a massive error that may not be undone. I think right now, President Trump is attempting to undo this through the use of government agencies to fix this problem that was done by bringing in all these people that ultimately, I don't believe at this point are in aligned with American values. I really don't. I don't see that. I see these people coming into this country, the United States, and I see them attempting to replicate what occurred in terms of where they used to live. I don't see the homogenization that should occur. What's the root word of diversity? You always hear this on the left, right? You always hear this phrase. Let's celebrate diversity. Let's celebrate diversity. Yeah, let's celebrate diversity. Let's celebrate diversity. What is diversity? What's the root word of diversity? Yeah. Yep. Division. Let's celebrate division. You would always hear this phrase that the United States is a melting pot. A melting pot. And that's important because it's no longer that. It's more like a salad bowl with a bunch of spoiled vegetables. And you're supposed to to partake. And yeah, I'm not partaking. I just don't see it. I don't see it. But the day of reckoning is fast upon us, and I think we're starting to see that now in terms of what is happening in Minnesota. I think we're starting to see that. I have to wonder what the average rural Minnesotan is thinking about what is happening in their state right now. If they really understood what was going to happen when all these people were being brought in. And again, you're talking about a group of people that, at least on the surface, I mean, look, if someone can prove me wrong and say that, great, these people are coming in and they are becoming part of the melting pot, but we don't see that. We definitely do not see that happening. In fact, it's just the opposite. What we tend to see is these peoples coming in and then again replicating the problems that existed in their home countries. Really, really bizarre. Really, really, really bizarre. You look at Ilhan Omar. Ilhan Omar. I believe her father, if I'm not mistaken, was actually, I believe they ended up over here because he was a field grade officer in the Somali military that was being used to do great harm upon many people. And that's why they ended up fleeing. And now old Ilhan Omar comes here and wants to replicate, wants to create the same conditions, the same hate for the United States that you would see in some other nation states. You can see her replicating that here in the United States in a leadership role. In a leadership role. I got to tell you, so at a certain point, do you, now look, I get we are not, the United States is not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic, and that's important. But hypothetically, when does it become okay to hit the pause button on democracy in order to save your constitutional republic? If you have 100 people, right, and 51 of those people decide that they want to jump off a cliff into a very shallow pond. They want to jump off a 100-foot cliff into a very shallow pond. We're not exactly sure why these 51 people want to do this, but for whatever reason, these 51 people have decided that's what they want to do. And in a democracy, those 51 people have a controlling stake over the other 49 people. So now all 100 people are forced to jump off this 100-foot cliff into this very shallow pool because 51 people have decided they wanted to do that. At what point do a few dozen people of that 49 rise up and say, not going to do that? Not going to happen. I'm not going to jump off this cliff into this shallow pool because you dimwits have decided that you want to do that. Not going to do it. Not playing. So in those conditions, I think any reasonable person would be okay with pausing democracy. No, we're not going to jump off this cliff into a shallow pool. We're not going to do it. I understand that for whatever reason, you feel that you have to go that route. If you really want to do it, you can do it, but we're not going to do that. So is that where we are right now in the United States? Are we reaching a point where 51% of the population wants to jump off a cliff into a shallow pool? Now look, if you go into the school systems, into the United States, grade school, colleges, by and large, they are being taught right now to jump off a 100-foot cliff into a shallow pool. Because, for whatever reason, it sounds good at the moment. And we see this taking place in a number of Western nations. We don't really see this happening in places like Moscow. Moscow is a very clean, beautiful city. We don't see it in Minsk. Clean, beautiful city. Don't see it. But in Western Europe, if you go to Berlin, if you go to Minneapolis, if you go to parts of London, Manchester, Paris, these cities are failing. There are whole sectors of these cities filled with illegal immigrants that are then replicating the societies that they came from. There's what is that guy's name? He is a content producer on YouTube. If you get a chance, it's definitely worth a watch. Let me try to find this here real quick, if I can find it. I believe it's Kurt Kaz. Anyway, this guy goes to these cities all over Western Europe and other places as well, and he focuses on really what is happening with this neoliberalism that is taking place throughout Western Europe and the United States. I don't think he's really been that much in the United States. Most of what I've seen in terms of him creating content is done in Western Europe. I think his last pieces of content was in Berlin, showing what is happening there. But again, at one point, If we were to go back in time 50 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, these cities looked so much different than they do today. And then you look at the cities today, and then you have to ask yourself, why do they look like that? Why do they look like that? Well, I can tell you why they look like that. They have imported these peoples that are essentially incapable of creating nation states. And I know that's tough to hear for some, but it is the fact. It is the absolute fact. Again, if we look at cost versus benefit, cost versus benefit of this forced and or allowed illegal immigration of these peoples into these Western European and cities in the United States, has there been a benefit? Are these cities better today with these immigrants than they were 50 years ago? And the answer, categorically, is no. They're not. If you look at some of these cities today, and sectors of these cities, where they have allowed this immigration to take place, and you compare and contrast of what things look like now to what things look like yesteryear, it is a big difference. And the problem is once these peoples set in and they take control and they start to replicate and reproduce, right, Serbia, Kosovo, right? And you allow this to happen, they will overpopulate you. And what you once had no longer exists. And you will never get it back. Now, this is correctable. You can fix this. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to look like right now what is happening in Minnesota. It's going to look exactly like what is happening in Minnesota in regards to immigration and custom enforcement operations in Minnesota. It is a necessary hardship to evict and create an environment where you project onto these people that they are no longer welcome here. Look, I get it. I get it's tough to say that and hear this. But the experiment has failed. The experiment has failed. These people do not come to you locally and you maintain what once existed. If you bring 100,000 of these people to Iceland, Iceland will not look like Iceland does today. I guarantee you. Iceland will look like, yeah, you named it. That's what it will look like. And this has been proven. time and time again. We have seen it in France. We have seen it in Germany. We have seen it in the United Kingdom. We have seen it in the United States. It has to stop. Or everything will be lost. That is the one absolute guarantee. If you allow these people in, what you had will be gone forever in a matter of a few generations. Gone. Well, look, I think I have gone on long enough. As always, thank you very much for joining us. Feel free to comment in the comment section. Tough talk today. Tough conversation. I get it. But sometimes tough conversations need to be had. Good day.